Hello, it's Text Adventure Thursday, and I am very, very happy to say that at long last we are ready to talk about some Far Sector again, but also a few more of our Poems of Hope and Resilience from the collection we've been going through on Poetry Foundation. Hi, I'm Amy Dallen. How you guys doing? Bazone Elf Sharp. Hey, Geeky Chappy, just back from work and nearly bedtime, so the perfect way to unwind. Serotonia, John Numa, Meaning of Night, Goblin Wars, Dark of Nate, JJ Dane, Geeky Chappy, Curiously Idle, Hail of a Wolf, Lieutenant Parallax. Serotonia is right. Honestly, pretty interesting reading this issue of Far Sector right now, huh? Green Thing LP, Galaxy, and Leia Sky. I am a robot, beep boop. Yornison, Not a Machine, Triamus. Meaning of Night says, all the reading has given me a sad, but it was good reading. Garolphus, WDM 1262, Shiny Marigold. Alright. I did not change the on-screen poems. Oops. We know what we're talking about. Sondheim God. Nice name. I think I've said that before, but it's still a nice name. Mercury 83. So how's everybody doing today? And if you want to go ahead and pull up some readings, let me pop a... Oh no, I've done the thing where it minimizes all the windows again. Why do they even have that button? We are talking today about poems 7, 8, and 9 from this collection. Hail of Wolf, you finally ordered Far Sector from your local shop, but it didn't get here in time. Oh, I'm sorry. WDM, we aren't talking about 6 yet, just so you know. Mostly we're going issue by issue, and we're only up to number 5. You haven't given any spoilers, but I wanted to let you know before you might get there. Goblin Wars is reading number 5 right now. Okay, we'll stall. Down Under Dwarf is doing good, excited for the weekend, and sleep in comics. Nice, nice. So before we get into Far Sector, which I'm so excited to talk about, Kenna Hawk. Everybody, some hugs for Kenna Hawk, please. Some cheers in chat, if you would. Shiny Marigold, congratulations! Alright, so who is ready to talk today about our 3 poems from Poems of Hope and Resilience? Detective Zen, thank you so much. 18 months! How did I make it to 18 months? I feel blessed to be part of this welcoming, inclusive, and loving army. I'm surprised that no one has yet to figure out I'm just hamsters inside a giant coat. Wait, did I write that last part down? Dang it! Your secrets, Detective Zen. Mercury 83 just reset for 26 months. Thank you so much. Welcome back to the Enthusiast Army, Mercury 83. Dark of Nate says, finishing up my reread of number 5. It's been a few weeks. A few eventful weeks. Shiny Marigold says also, Far Sector hits so different now. It is interesting, because this was all true when it was written, but it is very interesting to have it paired with current events. Poems! Chance Meaning of Night. Today we are talking about 3 poems. We might make these a little more brief compared to some of our previous discussions. Or not, who knows. Second Attempt Crossing by Javier Zamora. Facing It by Yusuf Kamanyaka. And Psalm 150 by Jericho Brown. These were all collected. The themes were not necessarily the ones the authors identify as being the most relevant. They're ones gathered together by the editors at the website Poetry Foundation, the organization Poetry Foundation, who have a website, where they collected a lot of poems together under the thematic headings of Poems of Hope and Resilience. Now, these poems contain a lot of different information, a lot of different emotions and stories. And we've enjoyed, with our previous 2 looks at sets of poems from this collection, that there are already just in 6 poems. We've had a number of different linguistic approaches, emotional approaches, ranges of content. Panda Dev is now following, thank you. That all fit under this heading, but are all very, very different. And so I love this week we add 3 more none of which is the same as anything we've read before, but all of which make wonderful additions to this collection. I loved, like, so far, I've just been loving going through this collection. Key squared, Barry didn't work, Stepper wanted to pop in to say hi. Have fun, thank you! Down Under Dwarf ordered some more comics recently, Thor, Wolverine, and more Far Sector, and making my way through them. Excellent, excellent. Elfsharp cheered! Also, haven't been around here for a few months. It's so nice to be back. Haven't had a chance to say happy Pride, y'all. Also, yeah, Far Sector. Elfsharp, I've appreciated getting to shout you out for VOD Squad, but it's nice to actually have you here. I hope you're doing well. And happy friggin' Pride. So let's start with Second Attempt Crossing. I'll pop the link in chat. It is well worth listening to the author read this one. Meaning of Nights also snagged the Strange Adventures #1, and the final arc of Birthright is going on, which is wild. I need to catch up on Birthright. JJ Dane is back at the office again for the first time since March. Of course, had to be 30 degrees Celsius and still no air conditioning. Aww. Heck yeah, hell of a wolf. Great emotes. So, I thought this was a really beautiful poem and a really interesting one for them to choose in Hope and Resilience. But the idea of being shielded and of honoring the memory of someone who shielded you and shields you still, I think is a beautiful way to approach. It definitely gets at the theme of resilience is not always something you do by yourself, right? It's the people around you and the people in your life who sometimes make that happen or make it possible. Olive Sharp is now hosting. Thank you very much. And thank you, WDM1262. So I'm definitely going to remember this poem for the love that's in it. Obviously, there is pain and there is survival and there is loss. All of that's in there. But there was a different live recording of Javier talking about this poem. He briefly prefaced it by talking about his real life experiences that fed into the creation of this poem, and the fact that during that place and time he was not with his family, and this individual to whom he's dedicated the poem, that was the family he had in that moment, and he wrote it for him, as the dedication tells us. Lemon Eater says this one was gutting. John says this one was very good. Serotonia has read this one before for your honors symposium class. This is one of the newer poems that we've read. I mean, you know, compared to Emily Dickinson. And it was interesting, the Poetry Foundation, I had this one specially marked as, I guess, having been published in their magazine in November 2016, of all times. Sabita from Uruguay, hi! I'm particularly struck language-wise by the second stanza, black-throated sparrows, and dawn hitting the top of mesquites beautifully against the herd of legs. That imagery is so beautiful and so specific, buried into what's obviously a heart-wrenching story. And the very significant title, Second Attempt Crossing. As Lemon Eater points out, this poem has a lot of connections to modern political concerns. Hi, Star Pilot 6! just last week, we got, 4 years after this poem was written, we got a Supreme Court decision protecting, at least temporarily, the Dreamer program. And obviously this is not primarily an educational stream devoted to those issues, but if you had any questions about that stuff, this poem would be a great place to start looking up those very, very real issues. Just going to throw in a plug here for the organization Rises Texas that helps refugees and immigrants. But this poem both has a lot of real-life modern human concerns and is a beautiful literary work. So appreciating it as both of those things, I think, is key. Obviously the line, "and I've never thanked you," hits very, very hard. So there are several standout moments, I think. For me, "I've never thanked you," "you called twice a month," and the nature imagery are three standout moments in this poem, full of beautiful phrases. Did anybody else have a favorite part or element of this one? John Numa wonders if you have any thoughts on the breadth of time it covers, given that the title focuses on the crossing. That really struck me. It is interesting, right? It takes an entire 2 lives and 2 life stories and distills them down to a moment. You can tell from the second attempt crossing title, and from in the middle of that desert. In the middle of is a place word, but it's also a time word. It's a moment and a location where all of these things happened. That is at the center of this memory that the poet is summoning back up to honor the person who was the key other figure in that moment. Yeah, I mean, even did anyone have any sort of, is anyone still sitting with some questions about what's happening in the narrative of the poem? Lemonator's curious whether imagery of the desert and the number 40 may summon for some folks biblical allusions. I don't know whether that's the case here or not. Thank you for the follow. Thank you, Kyle, for the follow. Al Sharp, responding to John Numa, says that feels partially like saying that even once technically crossed, there's a lot of still trying to get in culturally and away from things in the past. Shiny Marigold says, like their life went on, continued, but they were also forever living in that moment of crossing. Yeah, Lemon, let's see. How do I let you share? Let's see. Thank you, Lemon. Cinesilica, 4 months. Welcome back to the Enthusi Army. Thank you for being here. Excellent. So, yeah, just to talk through, this story paints a picture of a group of refugees, in this case, crossing through the desert, which is probably on or near the border between Mexico and the United States, and of nearly, or getting caught or nearly getting caught but eventually making it through, like either by escaping or being processed in whatever the typical way is, successfully entering the United States and being met on the way with violence from the immigration authorities, that's who La Migra is, immigration. And as we learn in this, whatever the white vans are the authorities, both Chino, who's addressed in the poem, and the speaker of the poem do end up in different parts of America. Chino makes it to Virginia, and the speaker makes it to California. And this you can read in the biographical information about Javier Zamora, that he did make it to, he had family in California. So here's the poet Javier Zamora. Was born in the small El Salvadoran coastal fishing town of La Herradura and immigrated to the United States at the age of 9, joining his parents in California. And is now an incredibly cool poet guy. He stated, "Poetry matters because there's a history of all the poets who have risked their lives to write. I think in the United States we forget that writing and carrying that banner of being a poet is tied into a long history of people that have literally risked their lives and died to write those words." I just like that bit from his biography entry on the Poetry Foundation website. So the point where they are caught and met with violence is where this older adult that was with, but it was not technically a family member to the poet, shielded him with his body when they were being met with violence. And the MS-13 has to do with a specific gang that they've been in the news a lot for the last several years, but a lot of refugees are fleeing violence from that specific gang. And in this case, according to the author, the person who helped him eventually got tracked down by the people he was trying to escape. And that was the end of the phone calls. So did that make sense? Obviously, I am not a journalist of this stuff. I'm not an expert on these matters. I try to pay attention because it's the world that we live in, and this stuff matters a lot. But as someone who entered the country at a very young age, Javier, at least according to the other recording that I found of him reading this poem, he was one of the people protected by TPS, which is a refugee shielding agreement. But that's all. That's all backstory to this. Excellent. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and the tattooed chest likely means that either Chino was a member or, like, had to pretend to be a member, or, like, there's a lot of reasons that you might... A lot of times the reason that you need to run is that you didn't have a choice about joining or being involved. But that past can haunt you because other people associate you with that, or because for leaving you are punished. It's a very tragic but true element of what's going on. And these would not be specifically people from Mexico, but I say the border between the U.S. and Mexico because it seems most likely that on the physical journey, that is where this crossing is probably being talked about. Bumpy, that is off topic, as I do have a baby face, but let's see. Leia Sky was particularly complimenting the line, the line of writing, the M, the S, the 13. And John Newman points out, for those interested, it may be helpful to learn more about the history of El Salvador. right. So yeah, I'm going to remember this one for a long time. It is very beautiful, and the farewell is a particularly poetic goodbye. Any more questions or comments on this one? Nice, Corpse Handler. Glad you could be here. Go ahead and queue up our next one. Hi, Crazy Cow. Today we are doing Text Adventure Thursday, which is my silly name for book club and very old computer games. So we are talking about a few poems from the following collection. Let me repost this link. 3 poems from the following collection. Second Attempt Crossing, Facing It, and Psalm 150. And then we're going to talk about issue 5 of Far Sector, the incredible Green Lantern sci-fi comic by N.K. Jemisin and Jamal Campbell. And then we're going to play some King's Quest. King's Quest 5 specifically from the early 90s. Which is not technically a text adventure, but I'm still calling it that because we've been playing through all the King's Quests and no one can stop me. All right. All right, Facing It by Yusuf Komanyaka is our next poem. There is an adventure. It is an adventure, and there is text. Fluffy Butt says, I liked the contrast of Chino's tattoo and his actions. We associate the MS-13 with negative things, but his actions are heroic, making a complex person. That was something the author talked about in the other reading that Javi Zamora talked about, wanting to humanize this character, or the way people think of folks who might be affiliated or have been affiliated or have their lives affected by MS-13 and other organizations. Thanks, berries. Hey, Lord Darkhand, we're heading into our second poem. For today, it is this one. Facing It by Yusuf Komanyaka. Now, this is a little bit older. This poem was written in the 80s. And it was written by an author in, I think, his second major collection, when he first began using his poems to reflect on, oh, well, I didn't mean it that way, but literally reflect, that's in the poem, on his experiences in the Vietnam War. So, Yusuf Komanyaka's Facing It. This poem is incredible. I am very happy to have read it, and it is very tough to read, and it is an interesting one. This is one of the most interesting picks so far for a collection assembled by the editors about hope and resilience, because it took me a second after reading this to sort of, I was sort of like, this poem is about hope, and then I was like, it actually is about what we survive and how it changes us. So in that sense, it makes sense to put it with resilience. But it's interesting because it's an interesting angle to come to this poem from. I hope that you all checked out, by the way. The website had a learning guide for this poem that I thought was great, that commented, that showed they drilled down into some of the specifics about the uses of words and where you end a line and how that helps this poem do what it does. I highly recommend it if you didn't check it out when you were looking through. Brian, thank you. Shiny Marigold says, it's definitely about resilience. I'm not sure why that it surprised me, but it's sort of, it's like, well, obviously, yes, by definition, it is about that, but it took me a second to get there, and that was my experience of it. Lemonade says, this was surreal, an experience of PTSD, perhaps. Leia Sky says, this one was good. I have actually visited the memorial when I visited Washington, D.C. I have visited it as well. Meaning of Night says, I visited when I took a trip to D.C. as well. Lemonator said, I had the same initial reaction of not understanding the connection to the resilience, particularly the image of the lost arm and the erased names. But what's interesting there is we also have the line, half expecting to find my own in letters like smoke. And of course, we know that his name isn't on there, right? I think most folks probably are familiar with what the Vietnam Veterans Memorial is. But if you haven't seen a picture of it or been there, it is worth looking up. It is a very, very striking memorial. It was one of the more sobering experiences of my life. But I have family who were in Vietnam, so that's part of it for me. Meaning of a Night says, the poem was definitely fitting of the vibe of being there. Fluffy Butt felt like there was some survivor's guilt, which I think is very accurate in here. Lemonator says, I suppose by brushing the boy's hair, an expression of life, it undoes the loss and erasure somewhat, or at least stands in contrast to it, right? I love that, and I picked this up partly from the poem guide, but there's a very strong self-correction at the beginning of this poem. I said I wouldn't, damn it. No tears. It's author to himself chastising, right? Reprimanding himself. I said I wouldn't, damn it. And at the end, there is another self-correction, but it is a more gentle one. It is, I thought for a moment someone was trying to wipe names off. No, it is what is likely a mother doing a tender gesture to a child, which is very life-affirming, right? There's so much good stuff in this one. I also definitely recommend listening to this because when I read the poem, I totally missed that there is an almost rhyme at the beginning of it. Well, hello, Aki! Hey, Acolytes! Shiny Marigold says, another instance of one's life continuing, but also living and reliving forever a single moment in time. Throw some books at the Raiders, please. You know how we do things. Be Right UK just reset for 29 months. Woohoo! It's an Enthusiast Thursday. Thank you. What were you all up to today? Our Kurtz Landry just subscribed. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Enthusiast Army. Oh, and gifting subs to the community. Arkroots Landry, thank you so much. Throwing a book fair for Garolfus, Keith Chan Art, Lantern Ladiel, Sweezy 1918, and Legend Hoa. Welcome all of you to or back to the Enthusiast Army. Talking Buckaroo Banzai? The movie? That you made Aki watch. Thank you so much. Sharing out some fabulous Pride emotes. Which is so much appreciated. For every time I believe that you trigger the sharing of emotes during this period of time, Twitch is donating 10 cents to 2 different excellent causes. Let's do it. Let's see. I think I blanked on the name last time, so I'm gonna look it up. Why can't I find this? There we go. Trevor Project and National Black Justice Coalition is who's getting 10 cents each every single time you are giving 300 bits or subbing or gifting a sub during this month. Kaskrzevics cheered. Everyone must watch Baku Banzai. It's the only movie. I keep a DVD of it right by my computer. So we are, just so you know, we just talked about Second Attempt Crossing, and we are now talking about Facing It by Yusuf Komunyakaa, which is basically poem 8 from our collection, Poems of Hope and Resilience. I'm going to pop it back in chat here. And we're calling out the incredible language use in this poem. There's a great, great poem guide on the site for this. And Sondheim God says, but when she walks away, the names stay on the wall. Hit me real hard. Library Liz, hey! I Left Sharp says, oh wait, so there's also the thing about future generations remembering or thinking about it in a certain way, and the idea of the parent trying to reframe things at first, only to realize she was just slowly showing the reality of it. That's a great way to look at this. That hadn't occurred to me. Death Star Taco casts Dewey Decimal System at level 3 to categorize the books. Nice, Leia! Liz, yeah, these poems were all 3 incredible. So Lemon Eater was disturbed by the reference to Andrew Johnson, though it couldn't have been the same, because of the footnote notes here. And I'm curious, I'd love to know the poet's comments on this, because with a few words, he potentially makes explicit reference to the history of racial injustice in America alongside and as part of this specific reflection on his own Vietnam War experiences. Because the name Andrew Johnson is apparently the real name of a soldier from Yusuf's hometown. And of course is also the name of the president who super did not help racial reconciliation post-Civil War in America. Now, because Yusuf Komunyakaa is a very brilliant poet, I believe won the Pulitzer in the 90s. It is almost certainly not an accident that those names are the same. Dark of Night has some recommended reading about the aftermath of the Vietnam War. Stephen King's Hearts in Atlantis. I haven't read it. For people my age, Dark of Night's age, it is an event that mostly took place in movies and TV, but it's an actual event in the memory of so many living people that left so many scars. Oh, and Aleph is adding some to the earlier comment. She was just slowly showing the reality of it, hence brushing hair out of the eyes, usually symbolizing revealing and showing the truth. Librarian Liz, there is a conversation of how many more African-American soldiers went to and died in Vietnam. Vietnam was partially famous as the one of our last wars with drafting, and the people who were sort of swept up into it because of social, economic, and other factors were disproportionately black and other minority soldiers. And there's a lot of complex conversations tied into that. The fact that even with volunteer armies, the economic opportunities and jobs represented by army recruiting are sort of disproportionately needed by certain communities, which means if your best lifeline is something that literally puts your life in danger, and the structure we've made means your choices are weighted in a certain way and the things you have access are weighted in a certain way, then that comes down unevenly, if that makes sense. Now, you guys know I'm an Army brat. The armed forces are special to me, and I respect service members a lot. But that exists in this context. That this is very important historical context to this stuff. And that's one reason that there's a lot of great songs and responses to Vietnam that talk about how poor kids or young adults took the brunt of it. And people of color that way took the brunt of it. And on a separate note, the people of Vietnam took the actual brunt of it. It's a complicated war. It's a very, very complicated point in history. But the series of emotions that you might have if you were in it and looking at the beautiful, sobering memorial that was erected to it, I think, is captured about as well as it possibly could be in this poem called Facing It by Yusuf Komunyakaa. Hi, Sprinkles. Hey, Marimo. Ms. Priscilla is now following. Thank you. So, Facing It by Yusuf Komunyakaa. Anything else people want to particularly jump in? The poetry of this poem is incredible. The thing I was going to say, I didn't notice until I was listening to it. Hiding inside the black granite, I said I wouldn't, damn it, is somehow totally missed that that's a semi-rhyme right at the start of this very beautiful poem. A thing I loved that the poetry guide pointed out is that when the narrator is uncertain, is halting, is struggling, you get stops in the middle of lines. I'm stone. I'm flesh. He's both. He's neither. He's struggling between them. He's simultaneously inhabiting them. Phrases like, the stone lets me go, really jump out at you. And of course, the actual imagery he runs down, names shimmering on reflection on someone's clothing. Seeing through someone else's eyes because your head's lined up. The reflection properties in the monument, Fluffy Butt says, was, interesting, was also used in the World Trade Center monument, showing that we cannot separate ourselves from those who we have lost. That's very interesting. I also love in the final image where he thinks for a second, it looks like someone's trying to wipe names off, which of course is the most human impulse, wanting to be able to say, no, no, catch these people back, make them alive, make this never have happened. It's a beautifully evocative, you can't wipe them away, you have to face it, which of course is a face, and the reflective surface is what this whole poem is doing. And I think it is a coincidence of them being next to each other, but it's an interesting coincidence that the white vans in the last one represent the forces of La Migra coming down on the refugees. And in this one, the white flash of the booby trap, which is in the narrative caught the soldier Andrew Johnson, but could be a metaphorical booby trap of race relations in America and being caught up in Vietnam as a black man. Could be. It's just an interesting linguistic coincidence there, that those words have multiple meanings, one of which is racial. Shiny Marigold says, brushing back a boy's hair, but the boy isn't there anymore. He's just a name on a wall, so it's a gesture of grief as well. Ah, interesting. I read it as a reflection of an actual mother and child, but it could be read as that she is brushing the wall itself in the motion as if it was someone's hair, as if it might be someone she remembered and lost. That's a beautiful reading. So an interesting note that you probably saw if you clicked on the highlighted annotations on the Poetry Foundation website is that at the time of the writing of the poem, there were 58,022 names on. There are more now. The names of some MIA and other folks have been added to the memorial. Librarian Liz, all of the reflections are both the actual person standing there and an echo. All of the imagery about reflections make it look like you're inside something. And this author has written so beautifully about looking at something and feeling like he's inside it. He half expects to find his own name on here, because he both did and didn't come back from it, right? Which is just an incredible expression of that experience and that idea. Absolutely, Olive Sharp. The dress being reflected with the names is someone going to the monument and visiting, but when they leave, the names of those they lost are still there, still remembered. Librarian Liz reads the mother and child as potentially protecting her kid from having the same thing happen to him that happened to the names on the monument. So I emphasized the life-affirming quality of it being a mother and child, but there may also be that sense of don't let happen to you what happened to them, or I want to keep it from happening. So this poem is amazing. And final thoughts, I'm going to pull up this next one, which is Psalm 150 by Jericho Brown. Ms. Royce says if we continue along those lines, maybe the wiping away hairbrushing is how we need to contextualize our history. Confront it head on rather than erase that it ever happened. The poem is called Facing It. That makes a lot of sense. Shiny Marigold says the way you have to face a painful memory but don't really want to, so you look and then look away. Death Star Taco did some of us have a tough time moving on. That's what's so beautifully captured in the when he says it lets me go, and then I'm back inside, depending on which way I turn. Fluffy Butt, you can find an audio recording if you would like, which I should have shared out to Book Club, of when Jericho read this on a podcast or radio show. So interestingly, Kamanyaka won the Pulitzer Prize in the 90s. Jericho Brown won the Pulitzer Prize this year. The 2020 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry went to a newish collection by Jericho Brown. This is from his 2014 collection, The New Testament, which, along with the name Psalm 150, is going to tell you that this poem is going to deal with some religious imagery from what I believe is Jericho Brown's sort of Christian background based on reading his bio on the website about growing up in the church. Meaning of Night was very confused because I thought Psalm 150 was the actual biblical one. Then I saw it was by Jericho Brown and was like, okay, not the Bible. But then I saw the listing that it was from the New Testament. It was like, wait, what? Then I had to look it up. So this poem, yes, they're using the name. Psalms are poems from what we know as the Bible. Obviously, the before it was the two-part Bible that a lot of us who might be raised in Christian context knew it as. The Old Testament is the actual legit religious document of the Jewish faith. And so this poem is in a long tradition of borrowing from, reinterpreting, using allusions to, or framing things in context of existing literary works with religious context. So there is a real thing known as Psalm 150. It is the one that you may or may not be familiar with that says, let everything that has a voice praise the Lord. Praise with cymbals, praise quietly, praise, I'm misquoting it, but it is all about praise and praising the Lord. So you can see that as context and try to make guesses about what Jericho Brown might mean by using the name Psalm 150. Librarian Liz, immediately in love with the pauses in this poem. The beautiful breaths and stops. It's a great one to read aloud. Death Star Taco notices that Jericho Brown Jericho is a great name for someone wanting to tear down walls. I'm going to guess was not an accident. I think Jericho Brown had a different birth name based on the bio on the website. So the other thing I think that's in the background of this one is that there's a different literary form going on here. This poem obviously does not rhyme, but it does use an established poetic form. It is written like a sonnet. Sonnets have 3 stanzas of 4 lines each, and then 2 lines at the end. Usually the rhyme pattern is like A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. Not always, but so those last 2 lines form a couplet that rhymes. You might know this from a lot of Shakespeare sonnets. John Newman says the collection of psalms that makes up the Book of Psalms is also itself multiple collections. Psalm 150 is the final one in the last collection for whatever that info is worth. That is cool context to have. Kiki Chappie definitely endorses listening to it being read. Librarian Liz says, thunder scares, lightning lets us see. That made me stop when I read it aloud on stream, Librarian Liz. It's a wonderful lesson that sometimes things that scare you are the things that tell you you are going to learn an important lesson soon. So my read on this poem is that it is, in its way, very joyful, I think. And it is intimate. It is about love, clearly. It is evocative. And it also contains struggle and grief and challenge, as we get in the beautiful final 2 lines. Shaking it, his head, like a man who's lost and lived. Something keeps trying, but I'm not killed yet. Now, obviously, that line makes me think of where we started our Poems of Hope and Resilience journey. Lucille Clifton's incredible Won't You Celebrate With Me. Uh, but I particularly think Lost and Lived is an incredible turn of phrase, because this also being a sonnet, it immediately makes me think of Shakespeare, and 'tis better to have loved and lost than never loved at all, right? Something that has rung down over the centuries that we talk about a lot, and is here inverted. Not loved and lost. Lost and then kept going. Continued to live. In this case, continued to love, if the first part of this poem is to be believed. Because there is a my man, which is very sweet in this poem, and the narrator and my man hold their breaths together in a very suggestive way, I think, at the height of hopeless touching. And that moment, the narrator suggests, is the moment when he knows what he knows. And that could be faith, which is suggested by the calling this poem Psalm 150, by ending it with Dear Lord, by talking about praise and worship. It could be believing a lot of things, but it's knowing what you know, and how you know, and when you know. And whether that knowledge is true is the question asked by the beginning. Because if some folks fool themselves into believing, how does Jericho Brown or the narrator of this poem know that he's not fooling himself? He knows because of the way it feels, right? Lemon Eater thinks this poem is definitely in conversation with the original psalm. Hey, Dr. Izumi. It's contrarian, not exactly sacrilegious, but definitely declaring a different faith allegiance, which is interesting. The original psalm says, praise, 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 praise. And this one says, as for praise and worship, I prefer the latter. So that's pretty clearly not an accident, right? Saying, there's a thing I think is better than praise, and it is this, and here is why. Because only memory makes us kneel, silent and still. The ecstatic heights of the beginning are now sobering reflections, to hop back to the last poem for a minute. Baron Lumen likes the poem's take on breath and worship compared to the psalm. Leia Sky likes the last two lines of this poem. Yeah, they're great. Aleph, I think you're, Shiny Marigold says, all of those things you just said, but I was too slow to post. That's why we're here together. Thank you all, by the way. I know it's a weird structure. It is not exactly the way one would wish to have a book club, to have one person talking and a bunch of people stuck typing. We pitch in to make this as elegant as possible, and I appreciate that. And I have a ton of fun doing it. Hopefully you all do. I do too. Lord Darken wants your money back. Lots of super interesting insights and really lovely to listen and read, says Breaker Dragon. Excellent. Dang book club with no talking, says Lord Darken. Sonam God says, for me, there is a maturity about sex in this poem, obviously. Jericho says life is shorter since we have learned to make love for each other rather than doing it to each other. It's fascinating to me to capture the moment of maturity that we do not learn until later in life. Fluffy Butt says, this poem feels like a love story to me. It's very romantic, I think. I think that's also reflected in a man who's lost and lived. To me, that carries an evocation, because of Loved and Lost, that the way you love when your heart's been broken before is in some ways deeper and more mature. And that's part of why this fits into a theme of resilience, right? Something keeps trying, but I'm not killed yet. It might be your literal life that is at stake, And this is also very much a guess. It might be wildly off from what Jericho Brown intends, but as a queer writer, he could be talking as well about the fact that a lot of folks growing up in a post-AIDS world have learned to associate that there are very strong dangers that can come with love and intimacy. I have no idea if that is what is part of the context for this, but I could see how it would be, and that every day of joyful victory and love in the face of that is another day of strength. So people emotionally trying to keep you from living your best life, a disease that might literally be trying to keep you from living any life. There are a lot of things that can be going into the survival. Obviously, being a black man in America, also, every day of survival is a win. That sounds blasé, but the poem is incredibly powerful because I feel like it has all of that in it. That is just my non-expert read. Brain, thank you! Death Star Taco points out, sipping tea or beverage of choice can still be had at this book club, though. Yeah. Oh, good. Shine Marigold says, totally having a good time, but my thoughts are faster than fingers. I'm just trying to, Darkenate, thank you. I'm just trying to, Darkenate points out if it's part of the context for you, it's valid whether or not it was the intention of the poet. I merely bring it up as, because I want to be specific about not saying, I assert that the author means this, because I don't know. Sprinkles the Dragon Cat, like we said, words are powerful. Marimo also read that as the context of that line. And Shiny Marigold was also wondering about it. Shiny Marigold, so many things out there trying to kill him, but he's not dead yet. Fall down 7 times, get up 8. Which is going to connect to our next reading. Aleph. Hey! Does knowing the context change the way you react to the poem at all, Aleph Sharp? So in Hebrew, at least the Torah, part of the Old Testament one, it's called Tehillim. That's my best guess there. Hence why I've spent part of this trying to figure out what it was. I'm not used to hearing the English names, just a tangential fact. It is interesting that part of what stands out to me in the what I would call the biblical Psalm 150 is sort of the praise is noisy. And in this case, the noise in this poem comes with thunder, which is scary. And in preference to praise, Jericho Brown cites worship, which is silent and still. So it's an interesting series of choices about sound. Good night, Bakery Dragon. Hi, VOD Bakery Dragon. Aleph Sharp says, although obviously there's some of it from there and some from the New Testament things, and there's very different reads of each one for a variety of people, even within small subsets of opinion on it. Meaning of Night says, there are interesting resources where Psalms and Tehillim transliterated. Interesting. Halo Wolf says, I've really enjoyed these last couple of book clubs and poetry being the focus. I've always struggled to get poems the way school wanted me to. This experience has made me look on poetry in a different light. I still don't feel like I have a great grasp on it, but I definitely understand it more than I have before. Anyways, cheers to book club. I'm so glad, Halo Wolf. To me, the best part of talking about poetry is getting to see things in it that you might not have noticed on your first read, because poems are so dense with meaning and with choices that you can read them over and over and notice new things or find new things in them forever, and talking about them with other people really accelerates that process. The way that the poem guide for Facing It really deepened immediately my connection to the poem. Without changing what's in there, it revealed it to me, you know? And I think that's very beautiful. Varen Lumen points out the biblical psalm is also a command, where the poem's reflections on worship aren't. It's hear me. It's sort of a like, you get it? This is why I like this. It's very different from this is what you must do. Marima says, thunder scares, lightning lets us see. Then, heads covered, we wait for rain. Is for a start gorgeous, but also, thunder is bad, a bad relationship falling apart slowly. Lightning brings clarity, the pain of separation, and they wait for rain. Rain brings life and growth and something new, a new relationship. Shani Marigold says, thunder is loud and scary, but lightning is silent and illuminating. And it's also funny because traditionally I think of lightning as the scary part because it can hurt you where thunder can't. And that is very much inverted here. But he's not wrong that thunder startles you. And lightning literally shows you things you didn't see or can't see. Sondheim God says, as an actor/artist living with HIV, the last line is so crucial. We can go through so much crap and so much of it isn't even our fault. But as long as we can get up, we haven't lost yet. And damn, that about sums up my life so succinctly. Thank you for sharing that, Sondheim God. That's a fantastic observation. Ms. Roy says also the noise is omnipresent in the biblical passage and fleeting in the poem. Thunder lasts for a moment and shocks. More focus is placed upon the lightning and the rain, vision and the deluge. Fluffy Butt says, this reminds me of one of my earliest memories of watching a lightning strike in the distance. I was amazed by the amount of light created. Aleph Sharp says, it does change it a bit. I don't know the psalm that's being referenced, but there are some parallels with other sections of Tehillim/Psalms, where fear precedes knowledge, the burning of the flame showing you its heat, etc. John Numa says, the contrast with the biblical psalm also shows up in make love for each other, rather than doing it to each other. Which is an incredibly evocative. We haven't focused in on this first paragraph, but it's very good. Certain we can stop time or maybe eliminate it from our lives is something that's going to stick with me for a long time. It is a beautiful aspiration, you know? Destro Taco says, at night sometimes you get a glimpse of day in lightning. Bakery Dragon kind of relates to what Hail of a Wolf said. I kind of relate about getting poems. Different from book club, but I recommend looking up Nevermore, read by John Delancey. Ooh, I found the poem repetitive and annoying until I heard him reading it as he really acts it and brought it to life. Okay, but for real, sleep time now. Good rec, that sounds great. You know what? And I said earlier that there's no rhyme in this poem. But the first two stanzas end with maybe, memory, and then it goes, hang my head, not killed yet. Could be coincidence, but, you know, they gave this guy a Pulitzer Prize. He probably did that on purpose, and I just did not notice. I really love this poem. All right. Final thoughts on Psalm 150 by Jericho Brown before we switch topics. Have we really gone an hour? Whoops. It's going to be a long book club. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry, obviously. Sondheim God. Final thoughts. Heavy snapping. Obviously, in different times and places is a approval for poetry being read kind of gesture. Means many things, but. Death Star Taco says, thunder is the voice of God, causing fear of God, which is the beginning of wisdom. The fear is the beginning of wisdom is a set phrase thing. Whereas Jericho focused on the physical senses, the here and now, and used those as springboard. Travis's final thoughts, thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening. Possibly also an illusion he is playing with here. You can never rule it out. Marimo says, I think there's also something very important about it being a psalm that's about worshiping a man, but isn't sacrilegious. There's a direct prayer to God in it, and it felt genuine. Marimo points this out as, given the context that some Christian communities have a problem with gay people. There can be a lot of problems growing up being gay, and in a Christian community. Now, different communities are different, but it makes it more striking that this is both a queer love poem and what feels like a sincere religious work. So, yeah, I am definitely going to be looking into some more Jericho Brown poetry because I thought this was fabulous. Also, had not noticed how strictly it follows the sonnet form because the meter and rhyme work differently, but man, what a poem. Some folks fool themselves into believing. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's the right number of syllables, which shouldn't surprise me. Should have checked on that as soon as I saw the sonnet shape. But yeah, a lot of depths in this poem. A lot of very beautiful structural stuff happening, in addition to the just lovely images and words. All right. And with that, are we ready to see if I can change this graphic live because I didn't plan ahead of time? Let's see. What did the last... This might be a disaster. Let's see what happens. Casual Lady Kate is now following. Thank you! It's not! Oh, yay! Cool! I did, in fact, save this other screen layout. Doing it live, folks! Plan. When did we start using that? So, y'all, today, on book club, we are talking about Far Sector number 5 by N.K. Jemisin and Jamal Campbell. We've been reading this book issue by issue. It is currently coming out in issues. It's going to be a longish mini-series, which will then be available probably to read in one big book or two little ones, depending how they do it. It is published by DC Comics. It is written by N.K. Jemisin with art by Jamal Campbell. This is the cover of the issue that we are talking about today. It is issue 5. The book itself is up to issue 6. We are trying to stay not caught up. And there was a gap in publication because COVID. So finally it is on the move again. And we are resuming our periodic looks at new installments of this very wonderful science fiction mystery series about a brand new Green Lantern, a new member we've never met before, of the new member-ish of the Green Lantern Corps, named Jo Mullein, Sojourner Mullein, and she is assigned to an extremely alien world, out so far they don't have numbers for these, in a far sector of space. And she has been tasked with solving the first murder in hundreds of years, immediately followed by the second murder. It's your go regard is now following. Thank you. Yeah, 12 issues. Excellent. Hail Wolf, gonna go for a bit as I haven't read Far Sector. Catch up, it's great, thank you. See you for King's Quest 5. Lantern Joe! So, after 4 issues of finding out about this world and getting hints as to who Jo is and where she came from and how she came to be here, issue 5 is the big backstory issue, and it made me so happy, y'all. I will say, this book is, look, it was perfectly relevant when it was written, probably last year, the year before, but its relevance is currently red hot for all of us who live in America, and it deals with a lot of hot button world issues in a beautiful, elegant, evocative, moving way. I'm more impressed by this book with every single issue. But that said, if you need to nope out on this one, I get it. Fluffy Butt says, I love the art in this book. Yes, Jamal Campbell is so good. So good. Indeed, Death Star Taco. It is straight up, she is like a detectiving her way through a classic murder mystery, but everything about it is made more complicated by the fact that she is doing it on a very bizarre, in a very bizarre context. There's a world where all the home worlds were wrecked and everybody lives on these platforms in a Dyson sphere, and the platforms have names, and there are 3 completely different species who all live together in some form of evolving harmony, which is a major portion of this. They're all very different from each other. They have a lot of complicated backstories. She's trying to sort through and understand all that context so she can help them, essentially as a detective / law enforcement official being sent there by Green Lanterns, the Green Lantern Corps. They requested help from a Green Lantern, apparently. And when she got there, there was a murder. And she was like, well, that's very convenient. Why am I here? And what am I here to do? Ideally, keep people from dying. And figure out why it's happening. And the part that hasn't come up yet, this entire civilization with the 3 different species voluntarily suppressed their emotions centuries ago to keep them from further destroying themselves after one of the great cataclysms for this series of worlds where their internal fighting wrecked their homeworlds. So in the spirit of never having that, never letting things get that bad again, they did something that's called the emotion exploit, that in theory the populations all kind of voluntarily began, but which people these days don't get a choice about. It's just how you're born in this world, or it is, everybody has these suppressed emotions. But lately, a drug has been going wild on the streets called Switch Off. It switches off the exploit, which means it switches on your emotions. And this first murder was done by someone on Switch Off. So, in the meantime, when we talked about issue 4, issue 4 was a very tough and dramatic issue because it got into a lot of world history as well, because it dealt directly with police brutality. Now that, as it turns out, is a part of Jo's story, and a key one. So we find out several things. Jo is from Earth. She is from roughly our day and age. She has lived God, we get so much of her life in the couple of pages of flashback, and I love it so, so much. Oh, the 10th key. Hi! I'm glad that excitement is contagious. Comics are great. I will also say, in her backstory, in addition to issues of racism and police brutality, and once again, another perspective on the American military, which she joins in an attempt to make the world a better place, and then comes to have some doubts about what she is doing and is involved with. Specifically with Mideast intervention. There are also just a trigger warning for folks that this backstory also deals with the events on 9/11 in New York, which I know can be an unpleasant surprise for folks who have that in their real backstory. Lemon Eater has hair envy every time I read another issue. The hair's amazing. The style in this book. Starpilot 6 was kind of surprised. So, in terms of our ongoing, this is y'all, full spoilers for 5, and only 5, of Far Sector. I was kind of surprised that since the last issue ended on a note that her ring was depleted to 8% and needed 5 days to recharge, this issue picks up like a week later. I kind of thought they were going to make a direct thing about her being on low power. That might just be planting seeds for the future. It is a surprise, structurally speaking, that they would just sort of let that lie there. Dan Fenn's now hosting. Thank you! Minion Knight says, it's really quite unfair how good Jamal Campbell is, but also not because we get to see it. I do think, as well, it is worth look at those flashback panels and look at which colors dominate. We've talked in previous issues about the way, for instance, when Counselor Marth is putting the moves on her, everything gets real violet. Violet is in the Green Lantern emotional spectrum associated with love. So look out for where yellow shows up, for where red and purple show up. When she's been fired from her job as a cop, not in direct retaliation. Well, we'll get there. When she's been fired and she's bummed out at the club and everybody else is vibing and having a great time and the music's playing, it's purple. It's purple just like Marth's dance scene, right? Lemon Eater says, can I just say that I love how this issue's key clue is vegetarianism? It's great. And it's very well planted. We get, in the middle of this issue, we get a scene where she is called by another of the counselors, Avrup Thorne, who has done some digging as she requested. We're in the middle of the mystery now, right? We're about a third of the way through this mystery, and things are starting to pile up. What led to this first murder? What led to the second murder? Who might be operating behind the scenes and why? Liz, are you still here? Were we happy or sad that there's some librarian representation? But apparently they are also not super highly paid on this world, because some terrible things are common to multiple worlds. So Aleph Sharp, in confronting this backstory, says, so first I have to say, seeing imagery of the Twin Towers attack alongside the other things going on as a New Yorker, Aleph Sharp, was a really connected idea. The contrast of first responders in one way versus another in New York City was a big thing, for me at least, considering. One of the things brought up, at least around here, in arguments about the horrible situation with law enforcement in NYC. So bringing them together in linkage of certain things was a big one. It's all clearly very intentional. In it, as a backstory, so zooming out to the idea of, let's make a new Green Lantern character, right? Green Lanterns are the fictional space cops, essentially, of the DC universe. There is a Council of Guardians who established them to help keep peace and protect people throughout the galaxy, and their rings are so powerful that basically one Green Lantern gets an entire huge territory to themselves. Earth is weird because all the stories happen here, so we get 100 Green Lanterns. But in theory, you only have one for each sector of space. That's their territory. They try to keep people safe, prevent violence, intervene in disasters. They do a lot of space cop functions. So I can't wait to get to the end of this and read all about what Jemison was doing or trying to do here. But she, from the start, she has her amazing black woman hero who is an intergalactic law enforcement official. And she gives her a past that addresses all of these ways that she has tried to translate the urge she has to make the world better into action. and that has come through education at Princeton, through serving in the armed forces, through becoming literally a cop, through the particular day of the attacks on the Twin Towers, when she and her dad apparently were both on hand and tried to do some intervention that has stuck out in her memory. And of course, it has as this context a lot of pain that led up to it. We get that incredible scene of her mom talking about not getting a promotion at work, which hopefully some of y'all have been seeing a lot of discussions lately of like hashtag publishing paid me, where people have been sharing what they were offered. And what was the hashtag? There was a hashtag being used by a lot of Black women in academia about their experiences of receiving unfair treatment, essentially, even now in 2020 in our institutions, as black women. It may have been actually Black women and Black men. I think most of the people I was seeing talk about it and use the hashtag were Black women. But that all, like, they just effortlessly get all this backstory in just a couple of frames, but it packs a huge emotional punch, or at least it did for me. I don't know about y'all. When it's the why does Jo feel a need to help, and how does she try to turn that need into action, and what does it look like when she does? Yeah, and Goblin War says Black Lives Matter is actually named in it. Now, what's interesting about that is, of course, the Black Lives Matter movement didn't start in 2020. It has had that name, I want to say, since like 2014-ish. Don't quote me on that number. But there have been, and like obviously the issue of police brutality, specifically racist police brutality, goes back way longer than 2014. So in some senses, it feels like some kind of weird miracle that this issue should be what we're reading right now. But in some senses, it's not a weird miracle at all, because this history has been happening. This context has been going on, and it has been addressed in and out of fiction by a lot of folks for a long, long time. I take it as a gift that it lands now for us talking about it in book club. And I admire the hell out of the way that huge, kaleidoscopically enormous, complicated issues come through with a line here and a brushstroke there in this comic. But that's what happens when really great storytellers make stories. 2013 is John Numa. Thank you. Dark of Nate was struck by, are you not black and alive? Should you not matter? Wow. That was the end of her career as a cop on Earth came when, on what is strongly implied that her career was probably functionally over as soon as she observed and failed to stop, but did try to act to get justice for her partner's own act of brutality, which we know in the real world it is incredibly difficult for whistleblowers who try to go against the culture that they're in for law enforcement. That is just a fact. Aleph Sharp cheered! And yeah, Dark of Nate, shout out to the late great Denny O'Neil, who addressed racism through Green Lantern comics back in the 70s. Certainly it was a... That's I think, key context for this comic in a different way. We'll put a pin in that. But the ostensible reason that Jo gets fired as a cop is a violation of social media policy. Because a friend, someone else, tagged her in a post for Black Lives Matter. And that's also very, very real. The idea... There have been a lot of stories coming out of, I was specifically reading some from black journalists who get sort of reprimanded by their papers for saying things online. They get sort of emails being like, about your tweet, that they think have violated neutrality or objectivity, and they struggle to figure out, like, okay, did someone decide, like, why is this considered a political stance? Why is this considered controversial? What is the context that makes that a firing offense? And it's very grounded in real world events and concerns. And again, done with like one line right here. Let's see. Serotonin says, my favorite panel on the whole issue was the panel that just had the military recruitment letter and the Princeton acceptance letter. It implicitly contrasts those options, right? Serving just to afford college, says Serotonia, is a common thing for Black Americans, and it just added a whole nother layer to Joe. And here's where the accidental mashup of this and facing it by Yusuf Komanyaka comes in, right? Where we were just talking about the context for Vietnam, for serving in the armed forces, and for what both the draft and later the volunteer army have as unintended but very real disproportionate consequences. I mean, probably unintended. I don't know. A few miscellaneous great comments coming in. Darkman8 says, Earth is a common home planet, both for Green Lanterns and Doctor Who companions. Weird, right? Starpilot6 says, I don't think I picked up before that the AT-AT were optionally corporeal. They're basically like hologram life on Star Trek, whereas I thought they were just sort of like a sort of cyborg race. It's very interesting, because we've seen them all acting and having bodies. But we haven't even talked about the crypto mines. Oh my god. Rogan, thank you so much for those cheers and for sharing out a whole bunch of cool pride emotes to chat. Meaning of Night says, I think this also shows a testament to Joe's character, because it's not like, oh, I joined the army, I did my time, I served, and now I'm done. She continues to find more and more ways to contribute. That hunger, that restlessness, that need to do something. And it's also, I think, a sweet nod, because Green Lantern characters in the past, John Stewart, one of the best and most famous Green Lanterns, also comes from an armed forces background. So I know that this is taking place in its own, like, side continuity, but obviously I want those two to meet and have a conversation. Please, come on. Lemon Eater has a personal story about talking to an army recruiter when you were about to graduate from high school. Hi, Stardrew. Aleph Sharp says, it's also interesting as there are statistics and upticks of applications and students trying to become first responders post 9/11. I don't think I knew that, but it doesn't surprise me at all. Sprinkles the Dragon Cat, this story reminded you of this reminds you of the Death of Captain America story. It was so impactful. Fluffy Butt, absolutely! One of my favorite moments. So, Joe's at her lowest. She's just lost her job as a cop. She's had to, she's ashamed of herself for freezing up in a moment of confronting unjust violence. She's also probably very hurt and betrayed and disappointed that her own partner is the person who was committing that violence. She's facing the highly scary and uncertain future of potential retaliation for reporting it, of having to testify against her own partner. It's a bad night. And she's approached by a stranger. A stranger that she thinks is very hot and way out of her league, as she says it. But it's not so much a league, it's a core. So, long story short, as Puffy Butt is pointing out, there is an incredibly cool series of pages where this stranger becomes who it turns out this stranger is. And yes, I definitely went back and re-looked at those panels 3 or 4 times, finding that Jamal Campbell, in the illustration, the key is to look at the height change. At the top of one page, the stranger is taller than Joe, and at the end of the page, the stranger is shorter than Joe and floating. And you literally don't, or at least I didn't notice it until I was, like, past the next page, where the transformation is complete. I went back and flipped back and went, are you kidding me? She was floating? So the light on the street starts to hit the stranger's skin, and in like about 3 shots of the stranger, you realize that the transformation has been complete, and a small blue alien is where a tall black woman was just standing. And that small blue alien is one, visually at least, we realize that she is one of the guardians of Oa. And we know that in the past issues, someone gave Jo a ring, a very special, unusual ring. And we now have every reason to believe it was this guardian who recruited her for the cause of justice, but on an intergalactic scale, and who has now dispatched her, most likely, to the far sector. Jenna Marigold says, she keeps trying to find ways to help to make the world more fair, but as my favorite page says, she starts to wonder if she's really helping or making things worse. Oh, it's so tough. Darkmanate says, Hal Jordan is usually former or current Air Force as well. I keep forgetting. He was originally a test pilot, and I keep forgetting they gave him the Air Force background. Jon Stewart is like an architect as well. People have a lot of history. Olive Sharp cheered! One more thing, because I'm late to my Doctor Who game. Issue number 5, Panel Watch. Notably, no action panels, even in the helping people in 9/11, which is an interesting choice in context with the issue's contextual ideals, which I'd really like to discuss in a future book club I could be there the whole time for. Also, recently noticed the full-face close-up shots have usually shown a change in emotions or thoughts. The full zoom-outs and horizontal rectangles tend to show events. Yeah. Alright, let's see. So... I was getting it out to look up that line that I loved. Ah. Yeah, it was... It was these 2 panels. This is Jo sitting on a bench, looking at her own hands after what her partner has just done. And thinking, because someone has to. And looking straight at the camera with determination and pain. So that hit real hard. The beginning of the sentence saying, right, you think the world's not fair, but maybe I can make it fair. And then there are 2 panels without narration. One of her partner who says, stop resisting, and one completely silent of Jo alone on a bench. And then she looks directly at the camera and says, because someone has to. Now, great superhero stories, for me, almost always have great origin stories. And her whole series of flashbacks is filled with all of the things that made her who she is. But for me, I think the one I'm going to carry is the moment she looks right at the camera and says, because someone has to. It's about as powerful a statement as you can imagine of dedication. In her case, rededication and rededication. She's on her, 4th attempt to change the world. You know what I mean? And she doesn't know it, but that night she's going to get the offer. Or sometime very soon. I'm not sure on the timeline. Hey, to Lovely. Corpse Chandler says, as an artist who's long wanted to work on comics, seeing art like this in another series I picked up lately just shows me how far I still have to go. It's just a beautiful example of what's possible. And remember, I'm sure Jamal Campbell looked at stuff and said, I don't know what I can do, and had to get as great as he is. Hopefully it inspires you to want to do amazing art and not just, don't let it make you, don't compare yourself to Jamal Campbell is all I'm saying. China Marigold says, yep, someone has to. Fall 7 times, get up 8. Ms. Roy says, it's a hell of a mission statement for a character. Absolutely. Serotonia says that I also love her whole story being a middle finger to the mentality that it's just a few bad apples, which has been something we've been talking about a lot culturally with law enforcement. Joe was a good apple and was punished by the system. It is very crucial, I think, to Joe's story that trying to figure out whether you can work within the system and whether it will work is something that she's come up against over and over and over again. You know, there are some people who never even try to work within the system. There are some people who will never accept any challenge to the system. And Joe's caught in between. In a lot of ways, she wants the system to work. And she has been seeing evidence her whole life that it doesn't work the way it should. If it worked the way it should, her mom would have that promotion. Her family wouldn't have been stressed out. Maybe her parents wouldn't have broken up. We don't know, but it is sort of suggested that stress didn't help. And whether those systems can work and can be trusted is something that she's trying to bring to bear because she's got a mystery to solve in a totally different set of worlds with totally different systems. But she has seen that those systems fail in ways that are unfortunately very familiar. It's key that this issue comes right after number 4, which is when, of course, the police of this world fire on peaceful protesters. And they were commanded to do that by the council that then apologizes for it. And the question of why that happened and what's really going on here. And in this issue is brought up for the first time, is one of these dead bodies supposed to be Joe's? Who is pulling these strings and why? Why is anyone in this world killing each other, which is the initial mystery, first murder in 500 years, and where is that going? It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger in the way so many mysteries do, right? Yes, and Lemonaders calling it all back to there have been quotes for every issue so far of Far Sector that contain whole universes of reading and recommendations. The title page quote for this one is by Audre Lorde, an incredible thinker and poet and activist. And Audre Lorde's very famous quote is, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house," which is all about whether working within the system can work and what the limits of it are, right? It specifically speaks to a Black American context, but it applies to alien worlds, essentially. That's corpse handler. Let's see. The other book Corpse Handler's been impressed by is Crowded, if anyone is wondering. Rose Stein / Ted Brandt do amazing expressions. Good God. Thank you for the follow. Please change your name if you're going to participate in chat. Meaning of Night says, also it made me feel like such a gut punch because the statement that the council apologized and will be reforming emotions law and everything landed so hollow because everyone knows it's not going to happen. But that's what's supposed to happen, right? You want them to apologize, but you're aware because of this context that that's just not enough and you're not sure you can trust it, right? So the book is teaching you the experience of, right, not everything is what it looks like. You can't take these things at face value. That's a key to mysteries, but it's also a key to institutions and to societies and to histories, right? You have to ask more questions. So in that way, Detective Mullen is on the case of this noir-esque murder, solving one murder, but asking the questions that get to the heart of systems of power and what that does to people, all kinds of people. Which I think brings us to one of the other things that happens in this one, which is that she's saying, I don't know enough about these worlds. I gotta think more like a local and understand this stuff. And she finds out something very dramatic, which is that her friend and assistant spent 15 years as a crypto miner and says, when times are tough, you gotta do what you gotta do. Something Joe immediately gets what that means and the weight of it, and she had no idea that this context of crappy labor exists in this world. Which gets to the heart of what we were saying, where if all your options are bad or loaded, you may be freely choosing those options, but you still have to look at the systems putting you in those positions. So her assistant says, basically, nobody made me. Sometimes you do what you gotta. But that doesn't mean it doesn't suck that we have a system in this world where a whole bunch of people, like one of their better choices is to spend 50 years using their incredible brains to do miserable, repetitive work that must feel real bad, to put that bluntly. Medium Knight says, I like her noir thoughts about, like, I gotta think like a bad guy, because noir guys always think like the bad guys. Also, very curious how the planting of that femme fatale clip is gonna, reference is gonna play out, since we already have some flirty relationships with several different people in the Far Sector universe. Shiny Marigold says, so, was she brought to this place to shore up a broken system, or to burn it down and make it new? Fluffybud says, this issue made me want to read the next issue very badly. I resisted for book club. I know I haven't read 6 yet either, because I'm trying to not to stay where we are, but it's tough. Shiny Marigold says, I think the council will be shocked to discover that she'll be doing the latter rather than the former. It's certainly what we hope for, right? Meaning of Night says, she also says, yeah, it was 50 years, but because of our virtual consciousness, every minute of yours feels like a year to us. It's an interesting note about the AT-AT. Starpied 6 says, it reminds me about how people talk about low-paid jobs and say things like, if you don't want to get treated like that, study harder. Yeah, but somebody's still going to have to do those jobs. And, yeah, you can't just sort of sideline discussions by being like, well, do something else. Or starve, I guess. You know? Dark of Nate wants to know if Marth is the femme fatale. I hope it's not Sis. Peace Captain Sis, because I like Sis. Dark of Night is not spoiling number 6, but is very excited to talk about it because apparently we find out how Joe is a huge geek. That's exciting. Corpse Handler says, I binged the whole first 5 issues when we started this read. There's no reason you can't read ahead. So, any other, more thoughts on this one. The actual development of the mystery, the clues we're getting from Averb Thorn, and a very crucial scene with the widow of the first murder victim, and Joe attending that funeral. Let's see. Also her extremely cool funeral look, I'm just saying. Style on point all the time. Also, you probably all spotted it, but when the stranger shows up, she's got a little Green Lantern logo on her outfit. And green borders to her words. So some clues for us, the home audience, before the big reveal happens. Let's see. I loved the piece about language. The neural process adding subtitles rather than overwriting the words is beautiful. Also, Joe finally found a food she can eat, so that's exciting. She buys 7 gallons of it. Butterfly meme. Is this capitalism hell planet number 3? That's the secret. They're all capitalism hell planet, including this one. Fluffy Butt was interested by the dedication from the counselor plant to the investigation. It feels right now like Averup Thorn is an ally. It feels like Averup Thorn is really trying to solve this with her. Also has admitted that he would like to literally eat her. So that's awkward. But, you know, as she says in this issue, like, at least he's honest about it. Nice to lovely. Alright, final thoughts on Far Sector number 5. Are we happy we're back to it? I know I am. And that it continues to be just extraordinarily good. And, looks like somewhere out there Joe has a couple of siblings, which is very exciting because I want 18,000 more stories about Joe, and I feel like eventually we would meet them. Minnie Knight says, so upon thinking, so far, Far Sector has been very strong as a standalone to you, with your general lack of Green Lantern knowledge. And I knew the Ring Giver was an alien, but I missed the Guardian significance of it. We still don't exactly know, like, is she a regular one of them? What's her relationship to the rest of them? How official is this ring giving? Why is the ring different? We have a lot of questions, but. Shiny Marigold recommends also checking out Bitterroot. That you picked up somewhere along the line. If you haven't read it, Bitterroot, the conversation between that book and this one is interesting. Meaning of Night, I feel like the ring is supposed to be designed for being very far away from the central power battery on Oa. It feels like it's sort of that's the reason that her ring is designed to do something different and that has different strengths and limitations. She doesn't need to recharge it with a power battery, but it has, you know, as we've learned from previous ones, takes a while to refill. Yeah. Bitterroot is, I believe, Monster Fighters in the Harlem Renaissance, which is as fantastic a pitch as I have ever heard in my life. So, who wants to go on and read number 6? I might wait a little bit. I'm going to check. Let's see. When does 7 come out? I like to keep us slightly behind, so we're never out of Far Sector. John Lewis says, maybe. Yes! Shadows of Life wants to know who trained Joe. With a different ring, does she need different training? It feels like the only person we know she interacted with is the Guardian, or the invisible mentor we've been seeing, who we assume is this Guardian. So she may not have ever had a Kilowog-style training. Star Pilot 6 is trolling chat by declaring that you're fine with stopping here. Tongue firmly in cheek. Let's see. One moment. Why does your button not work? Okay, gonna manually look through here. Yeah, the real brainwave, we're gonna have to start checking different sources for release dates, unfortunately, because of distribution stuff happening. All right. Buffy Butt is still wondering how people deal with difficult emotions without any experience with them. That was part of one of the great monologues in an earlier issue when she's talking to Sis. Almost there, I swear. I'm just paging through some results here. Alright. Alright, Far Sector 7 should be out at the beginning of August. So we're a little over a month away from 7 is the current estimated ship date for that one. So maybe we'll wait a little bit before we do 6. But in the meantime, y'all ready for 3 more poems next week for book club? The next 3 from our Poems of Hope and Resilience, which are going to be Carrying Comfort by Gerard Manley Hopkins, Simathoa Exigua by Roger Reeves, and Try to Praise the Mutilated World by Adam Zagajewski. Hi, Crimson and Dread Pirate Robert. John Newman says, thanks for introducing me to this story. Yay, I'm so glad you're digging it. Shiny Marigold says, sorry, stream freeze, but if we're considering carrying on with Far Sector 6, well, yes, please, obviously. I'm going to aim at late July for our number 6 so that we will be caught up, but number 7 will be at least in sight. Meaning of Night says, I can't believe next week is July. I was like, oh, August is so far away. Delovely says, I feel like distributors should take a hint from fandom. We ship incredibly quickly. Alright, so 3 more poems from our collection, Hope and Resilience, next week. And then we will look forward from there for Text Adventure Thursday. So I believe it is time to maybe take a break and get ready for some King's Quest. We're going to take a break on the poetry screen. Marimo says time is so fake. I thought time was fake last year, and boy was I wrong. Son of God, I have been trying to just update the panel that is underneath this video. I don't know if I updated it accurately for the 3 poems we were doing today, but I will after Quest today. Sylvie, King's Quest by request! And Meaning of Night, the folks in our amazing Discord, the community-run Discord, there is a book club channel where folks tend to keep updates going, which I appreciate very much. And I'm sorry, Fluffy Butt, I still have not updated that book club thing, but it is still the right length for the collection. Alright. Bio break. Possible confusion to follow because I didn't set up all my windows in advance this time. So the transition to King's Quest is gonna be rocky. But stay tuned, because we'll be there soon.